Hello, my name is Elizabeth Lopez, and the title of my article is it pay levels or pay raise that matter to fairness and turnover in the workplace? So a little behind the article is it's gonna I'm gonna talk about the background and the theories involved in testing for the theories and how it relates to the fairness in the workplace. So here's a short video just to explain what the equity theory is and how that relates to fairness in the workplace.
A second process theory is that of equity theory. Equity theory refers to the perceived fairness in outcomes we receive relative to our contributions and the outcomes and contributions of others. The following illustration of equity theory shows how individuals are motivated. Here, we see two main components: inputs and outcomes. Inputs refer to anything that people give up, offer, or trade to the organization in exchange for outcomes. For example, effort, experience, education, and so on. Outcomes are factors that an organization distributes to employees in exchange for their inputs. So, for example, salary levels, raises, recognition, etc. Individuals compare their own outcome input ratio with that of others. Let us consider an example of a student in OB class. Students' input might be hours spent reading, preparing, attendance in class, attention in class, and so on. Students' outcomes might be learning or grades. Using this example, suppose you study 30 hours for OB's final exam and receive a B minus. Now, you know your friend studies for 1 hour for the same exam and received an A+. In such a scenario, you might compare your input-outcome ratio to that of your friend and perceive unfairness. When individuals perceive such unfairness in the workplace, this can affect motivation. Individuals who perceive that they are under-rewarded feel anger and tension. To restore equity, they can try to increase their outcomes for one, for instance, talking to the boss or stealing from the company. Or two, they might shrink their inputs, for example, reducing intensity and persistence of efforts. What do you think individuals do when they perceive that they are over-rewarded? Do they try to create equity? Well, some individuals may feel guilt and thus respond by increasing their inputs, for example, their intensity and persistence of effort, in order to restore equity. In reality, though, people often just readjust the way they conceptualize their inputs to make them seem bigger. This is what we call cognitive distortion. Of course, no one really tries to shrink their outcomes.
Okay, so a little about the video is it just talks about how equal pay is important in the workplace and how that affects employees and their inputs to their work. So here's some background behind the article. It discusses the perception of fairness in the workplace and also discusses the relationship between actual pay and two types of fairness models. The first one is procedural justice, and the second is distributive justice, and how they're related to pay satisfaction, pay level, and pay raise, and ultimately the impact on turnover. Procedural justice, it refers to how employees perceive fairness by the processes and methods used to determine the amount of pay. Distributive justice has to do with the employee perceptions that their pay is actually fair. Okay, there were two studies that were tested and examined based on these relationships. For each of the studies, the measure of pay and justice variables were obtained on a cross sectional basis. The results and the role of distributive justice and its influence on pay satisfaction. There was a survey that was mailed out to employees to provide their employee numbers, and that enabled them to obtain actual pay data and retention and turnover data from company records. So the first study was taken from 228 managers from a corporate office in the mid-Atlantic and southeastern parts of the US in a single organization. The second study was taken from 194 part-time MBA students from a large public university and from a number of different organizations, and that included turnover and tension. Mediating effects of distributive justice. This refers to the fairness from the outcomes achieved within an organization. It relates to the equity theory, given that employees' fairness matters, and employees, they compare their outcomes with those inside and outside of the organization. Based on the studies done by researchers, they do support the idea that distributive justice positively influences pay level more than it does pay raise. A greater focus on the allocation pay system as it relates to pay satisfaction. The role of procedural justice. As procedural justice focuses on the fairness of the policies and procedures of how decisions in the workplace are made. If a policy is created for a division in an organization, the policy needs to apply this to everyone in that group. Researchers believe procedural justice directly and positively influences both pay level and pay raise satisfaction, but focuses more towards pay raise. As pay level is normally determined as an employee enters an organization, it is also altered through pay raise mechanisms. Pay satisfaction dimensions intention to turnover. It appears likely employees are not satisfied about their pay if distributive and procedural justice are low, and that will have a high tendency of them leaving the organization. Researchers have found a significant link between pay raise satisfaction and organizational commitment, which is a negative intention of turnover. Okay, so course relevance. The article was relevant to the course to better understand the fairness of management decision making. It's important to what influences pay satisfaction and the impacts on turnover for management to maintain a productive and committed workforce. They will be able to better control and address issues and concerns rather than to ignore them. These are all important for an organization to be successful. And for my conclusion, so the article highlights the importance of distinguishing two pay satisfaction dimensions, and the impact of both systems are aimed at paying for performance. There is a connection between pay raise satisfaction and turnover intentions. For example, a voluntary turnover of lower performance who receive lower pay raises. It gives an organization an understanding to give close attention to the fairness of procedures related to pay raise allocations and how pay raise information is conveyed to employees. As satisfaction discussions are important to address for individual progress in an organization and focus on things they can do to aid the development and increase their prospects. Okay, so here is my works cited page that was provided by the professor to discuss the article and just show the relationship between pay raise and satisfaction. And I would like to thank you for listening to my presentation. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. Thank you.